and budget considerations. So who's taking the lead?
Yeah, so I'll start, Mayor.
Shane Hale's gonna lead us off.
Okay, thank you, Mayor and Board. So, it's hard to believe that it was just 13 days ago today that the governor basically gave the order and said effective March 17th, restaurants needs to close. And so staff has worked really hard to try to get some assumptions, and I'm gonna use that word a lot, assumptions, because honestly, the last month of sales tax we collected, everything was up. We just know that that's a false indicator, right? Like things have gotten bad. And so kind of the assumptions that we used to staff were, we went kind of revenue source by revenue source and discussed those, and didn't discuss what we're forecasting or projecting. It was more along the lines of, well, geez, how bad could this get? And so I want the board to keep that in mind, that when we're talking about these numbers, that there is no way that any of these are going to actually be what we collect. We've tried to be really conservative with the forecast as far as the amount that we're projecting them down, with the absolute intent and the hope and desire that, in 3 or 4 months, we're going to see that we were more conservative than we needed to be. And I think we can have this discussion again with the board of, okay, with the recommended cuts or amendments to the CIP, what needs to come back in. So that's kind of the background for you. So I think the total adjustments are about $14.2 million. That's capital and operations that we're recommending. And
Is that what this reduction column represents, or where
no,
is that?
that's just for the CIP. It
Okay.
was, and then there's another thing too, and I noticed on the memo after we'd already sent it out. So everything in blue is part of our CIP. So that's basically our sales tax, traffic impact fees, use tax, gas, oil, and severance taxes, what generates in those. And because the CIP has historically received so many different sources of income to build it up, as we went through and started forecasting all those funds down, you'll notice in a few sites that our CIP is actually the one that we're doing the most work with, recommending that we cut the most. There's other funds, for example, I'd just say the sewer fund, which is really not impacted by this at all. So we don't really have to go through and look at all of our sewer projects, because there's really are no revenue sources that go into them that really dictate us making any adjustments. So anyway, so we went through and looked at basically the high focus here has been on the CIP projects, as well as just operationally for all the funds that rely on the general fund. So with that, I guess, Carl, if you want to go to the next slide, and then, I don't know if you or Dean were going to start us out.
I can get started here. Can everyone hear me?
Yes, Dean, we can.
Yeah. Okay. So as Shane mentioned, we started looking at the taxes that we may collect or not collect. I want to emphasize here what, bouncing off of what Shane said, is as we go through this here, I want everybody to know that even if these happen and they're, this extreme, we still are going to be able to write checks, and we're not going to be bouncing checks. I think we need to be aware of that. But that being said, we had a pretty aggressive CIP program this year, and the items on the screen here are things that we use to fund the CIP, and so that covers that. We looked at that. We thought about stuff that might get reduced, and then we went back and worked on the various projects. So that's what I basically had to say here. Anyone else want to add? Okay. Can we go next? Yeah, same. Go back.
Do you want to go back to the previous slide
Yeah.
there? Okay.
To this one, yeah.
Yeah.
Kind of thing here. These are things that are driven by, our robust growth here. So if the growth slows down, these are things that would go down as well. So I'll just, you can read those and we'll just answer any questions later.
Yeah, and so this is Shane. I just want to point out that right now, from our development side, things are still going really strong. We still have our builders getting just as many single-family building permits as we've ever had. And so right now, when we're forecasting these, we're not really seeing any evidence of that yet. But again, we don't know. I would point out that the oil and gas royalties up there really have nothing at all to do with COVID-19. That is completely due to just the oil market and the between the countries of Russia and Saudi Arabia and what's happened with the price per barrel of oil right now. So again, we haven't really seen this bear out at all. So when we say it's down 40%, it's really hard to bear that out other than to think that there could be a lag in building activity given what we've seen in other industries. So Carl, do you want to go to the next slide, because I think it shows it just kind of illustrated a little bit better for the board.
David has a question, Soslowski? Go
Yeah,
ahead.
thanks. Yeah, just a quick question, Dean, on, we've kind of been focusing on sales tax here. Are we kind of locked in terms of 2020 property tax receipts? Or because that's a significant portion of our revenues as well, or are we kind of anticipating some drop, just perhaps more on a default basis than lowering of assessments?
I would guess if we do, well, let me back up for a minute. We usually get good sizes property taxes here in March, because, people split up their payment. And then the next one we usually get in June. So I'm thinking that we already assessed the levy. We already did the mill levy. I don't think that the values that we put those on will go plummeting. I think it'd be more like the second one that you said, is that I think if we start seeing a reduction in property tax, it would be because people defaulted on the payment. Does that answer it for you?
Yeah, I think so. Chances are it'd be minimal impact, at least during 2020.
Yeah.
That's right, David. I think that really the big property tax swing that I'm anticipating is more with the oil and gas, and just seeing, really for those 2022 receipts, when what happens in 2020 is reflected in revenues. I think the 2022 property tax is going to look markedly different. But right now, we are thinking it'd be de minimis, at least for this year, on property tax.
Okay, thanks.
This is just kind of graphically showing what we talked about previously. So, okay, Carl, can we get to the next one?
Well, and before we do, I guess just kind of back up, I just want to illustrate for the board again, when you look at sales tax, as that looks at 50%, it kind of tells a story of how that's going to play out in our operations as well as in our CIP. So when you see that in development fees, how far we forecast them down, it just kind of illustrates that's the hole we're trying to dig out of right now.
Right.
So this is fairly self-explanatory. Now keep in mind, this was the 2019 actual sales tax, and we broke it out here by the sector, and you can read each one there. And like I say quite often, the grocery and convenience and gas stations are our biggest driver. Like I said, I don't, you can just see that there. I don't think I'll need to add any more to that unless somebody had a question.
Well, and Dean, I'm sorry, this is Shane again. So when we look at all these different ways that the town collects revenue, that's why we went with such a high percentage, 50% sales tax, because you see we're impacted everywhere, right? I mean, people, we know the restaurants and retail could be down. We think nobody's driving right now, so auto and auto related could be down. Leasing could be down, or lodging would certainly be down. And so because it comes in so many different ways, it was hard for us to take a real light approach to sales tax. We thought, let's hit that 50% mark and really try to assume such a big impact that we're not surprised at the end of the year. So that's why, just because it comes in so many ways, and again, it's just conjecture, but we don't know all of the different ways that we could be impacted.
Miles has a question?
Go ahead.
Go ahead, Miles, unmute yourself.
Hi, Miles Baker with your town board. I have a question about the sales tax split. I think in previous years it was somewhere 50-50 between capital and operations, I'll call it. Is that going to continue going forward, or are we going to have to shift more towards operations for staffing?
So it's 60-40 right now. So 60% goes operations, 40% goes to capital. And then also in capital, we also have traffic impact fees, we have use tax, we have gas and oil leases, and we have severance taxes, as well as some other grants and other things, but those are kind of the big ones. So I think that would be, if that's a policy discussion to have, it would be for the 2021 budget. I think you'll see as we get through this town board that at least with the recommended cuts that staff has up there, I think that 2020 is fine with all the ways that it's currently split up. If we think that this is going to linger for a long time, I think that's a discussion for a different board, but ideally we would keep that 40% still going to capital projects so we can continue to maintain the high quality of life that our residents enjoy.
Tom Jones has a question? Go ahead,
Yeah,
Tom.
Shane, okay, on the oil and gas, and the severance tax, now you show what, that was like a 25% reduction under budget?
No, we showed that it's 75%.
So it's 75% of budget. And that's because it's based on 2019, what they will owe us for 2019?
No, we're showing it, we're projecting it's gonna be down by 75%. Because that's,
Down by 75.
yeah, down by 75, because that's gonna be actual tax collections in 2020. So there's more than two ways, but the immediate money that comes in with oil and gas, or with severance tax monies, with oil and gas leases that we have, and then also to a lesser extent, federal mineral lease dollars. So those are all same year money. So this is where we're gonna see the diminishment of oil and gas revenues in this year. We also have our property tax collections, and there's a lag with property tax, so we should see that in 2022. So this is kind of the first phase where we would see it is here. And so that's why we're projecting down 75%. I know that operators haven't shut down completely, Tom, that, they still are operating. It's just at a lesser tune. And so, as we have revenue come in from these different months, if we start to see actual revenue down, we can take a look at this assumption and obviously revise it further if we needed to. But right now, 75 was about as big of a swath we felt comfortable projecting down without really knowing.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
David has a question?
Yeah, hi. Just on that, I was just going to ask you to go to this table because the first column shows those gas and oil royalties, and it shows the reduction down to 1.4 million, which you said, but the reduction from 1.8 to 1.4 is not 75%.
Yeah, explain that slide, Carl. Explain that.
This is Carl, budget analyst for Town of Windsor. I believe the 4.4 should be a 75% reduction, David. I'm sorry, I don't have Excel right beside me, but I do the calculation, but I believe it should be close to 75%.
That's not
Well, if you cut it in half, it would be 900,000 from 1.8. I mean, so 75 would end up being $450,000.
Carl, using my calculator, I got it at 75%.
Yeah, so it's, the budget was 1.8 and the reduction is 1.4. So the big bar graph is showing the amount reduced, not the amount that remains.
Yeah. That's,
Got it, okay, thank you.
Mhm.
That changes a lot of things.
Yeah, because I guess we could have illustrated it with what's left, but we're illustrating what is being cut. So yeah, that does,
Okay,
okay.
lose about 1.6, right?
okay, got it, thank you.
That is all for questions right now.
Okay. Which slide are we on here? In reductions?
Yeah, some reductions.
Yeah, this is an illustration by fund of if you take the money that goes into each fund and instead of, just writing it on here by name, this is the total of the fund reductions based on the smaller line item stuff. So there again, like in the general fund, we originally had 25.4 million in revenue there, and we were sitting at 4.8. So, to go off of what Shane said, hopefully it doesn't go that far, but 4.8 is a pretty good chunk if, we have to keep paying people for work, so.
Well, and one other thing before we leave this, Dean, I just want the board to look at the capital improvement fund specifically and see as a portion of our initial budget for that, how drastic, so again, that's why we're gonna really try to focus the board in that fund today, and that's where staff has been, because philosophically, we started out and said for each of our big capital funds and really for everything, we've got, the board has an adopted fund balance policy. It's something we've always worked to, so we start out with that as kind of our basis. And so looking at that fund balance policy, and like Dean said in the beginning, we have really strong fund balances in a lot of funds. When it came to the CIP, because the board has been, I think, really aggressive in its desire to fix our roads, make them wider, do some capacity things, do some pedestrian trail connections, everything the board has done there. That was really the place where we had to come back in and take the hardest look, because if we hadn't made any adjustments there, that was actually a fund that not only would we, right now we project that we violate our fund balance policy with, but actually if we didn't touch anything and our revenue assumptions were right, we could have actually spent that into a negative. So again, that's why we're really focused there, because that's where we're really seeing the immediate impacts of this.
Okay.
Okay, go ahead, Dean.
Oh, no, I was just reading what I wanted to say here. We tied this to the strategic plan, to the focus areas. And again, we have a total there of reduced each one of those, but we also have some follow-up slides that we will detail it a little bit more in the slides to come.
Right, well, and more with this team, so these are not detailed. These are basically all the reductions that were on your spreadsheet that aren't part of the CIP. So for example, like quality of life, a big cut is we don't believe that we're gonna have to do the multi-purpose field at Diamond Valley. That was $4 million. That was a quality of life deal, but it also wasn't funded by sales taxes or any of the CIP funds. And so this slide is just a summary for the board. We haven't detailed that in slide by slide, but we did want to capture it somewhere. The next slide is also kind of the aggregate recommendations. Yeah, there, that's 6.7, but this is going to be detailed in the following slides. So we wanted to capture that information so the board saw it. It's in the spreadsheet, but we also didn't really want to go line by line and just determining what you guys wanted to talk about until we heard your questions. So this is really just CIP is what these are, and these are detailed in the following slides. So if you want to just go to the first one. Okay, so infrastructure, so again, that's just part of the strategic plan category. So that's how we have our CIP laid out now. So in infrastructure, the big ones, so the town, sometimes when we do a developer agreement, when we sign one like we did with the Harmony Ridge development, as well as with the Ptarmigan development, we've agreed to reimburse them for oversizing in within 90 days of them doing that project. So that's just been part of the kind of incentive to the town to say, hey, look, build these medians for us, build our lanes as well, we'll reimburse you in 90 days. But there's no requirement on the town that we do that. Actually, I think our ordinance says that 20% of our fund balance, we have to budget at least 20% to reimburse developers in the following year. So this year in our CIP, we showed reimbursement for County Road 5 and Fossil Creek Road, or Fossil Creek Ranch Road. So we showed that in the budget as though we were going to continue the practice of within 90 days. But I'll tell you that we don't have the fund balances to do that based on what we're projecting. So we haven't executed a development reimbursement agreement with this developer yet. So staff is just recommending, to the extent that they do want to move forward this year and we get a development reimbursement agreement, it would say, the board will budget for this reimbursement in 2021. We can't do it within 90 days.
Who's the developer?
That's
It's not a
Dallas.
Dallas Horton?
Dallas Ford, yeah.
Oh, yeah, you may not have to worry about that.
Right. So we may or may not, but we're just saying, to the extent that we have a development reimbursement agreement this year, if he does move forward, staff would highly recommend to the board that we pay back Mr. Horton in 2021. The transportation reserve, so that's not actually, something that we intended to spend, we just had it sitting there. Street maintenance overlays, so we went out to bid on all the projects that we wanted to do. That $220,000 is kind of the savings we have from what we budgeted to the bids. So in normal years, we may take that $220,000 and say, gee, should we add some more alleys in? Is there another neighborhood that we could add into this? This year, we're just saying, let's just stop at our bid and save that $220,000. Power surge equipment, so that was for town hall. We actually did a look with IT and engineering.
Can we go back to the maintenance overlays? Why are we only pulling back 220 when there's almost 2 million in there?
Well, because we've already gone out to bid, and we had the 2 million that we bid. We got or 2 million that we budgeted. We got a bid back at about 1.8 million. So that's our normal street maintenance. That's not anything extra. That's just kind of our normal street maintenance things. So again, the board, whatever you guys want to do, staff's recommending that we would still do our normal maintenance projects. I'm just not.
So that's normal maintenance for neighborhoods that are scheduled to keep that index up to, what is our index, to keep our index, whatever that number is.
That's right. That's exactly right.
Okay.
And so I think Omar is on the line. So Omar, do you have anything you wanted to add to that?
Omar,
We got a really, can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay. Yeah, Omar, engineering manager, Town of Windsor, we did get a really good bid on that. There was a couple other projects we were looking at doing, but based on the current circumstances, we recommended moving forward with the current bid, which is what Shane said about 1.8 million.
Right. Well, and not adding to other kind of elective projects. Again, if this had happened 2 months ago, we would have probably said, hey, look, there's another couple alleys we could do or something.
So I have 2 questions. One, on projects like this, where we do have bids, how secure are we though? I mean, this bid came in really good. how secure are we or beholden is that bid in light of the circumstances? Because none of us knows when we come back out of all this, will bids beholden to hold at that price line? Or are they gonna come back and, because of other unforeseen circumstances, raise bids on us? Or maybe in some circumstances, lower bids on us? But how secure can we be that that bid is gonna be the number? And I would say that, because that has to be part of the equation, because it could come back higher, it could come back lower. And also, in the extreme that this continues on longer than anybody anticipated, this might be a section, unless some of these roadways are like, just in, dire, people can't even maneuver on the roads. This might be an area, again, as a secondary or, third tier that we might have to come back to at another time. I would just put that out there. If it's not an absolute, I think right now too, it's very important to identify absolute necessary things that we either can't stop or that we absolutely have to need or maintain, anything related to actual services that, our residents need or would be expecting. But things like this, where I absolutely, while we can keep it up, but I think in the extreme condition, we should have that other tier of what else do we have to maybe cut? And this sounds like it might be able to be in dire circumstances.
Right, I found, really what's driving this for us, because I would say that I think that things like street maintenance overlays should be one of the higher priorities, because it's keeping our level of service where it should be.
Okay.
When we have things like, again, we have development agreements with the Ptarmigan Fourth and with Harmony Ridge, and both of those developers have indicated that they're gonna move forward this year, and, with widening of Harmony and with County Road 5. And so we're contractually obligated to do that, but those are really big expenses for the town, that we've said, yeah, we'll take care of our share of that. If we were not already in development agreements with them, my recommendation would be to say, hey, developer, we'll try to budget to pay you back next year. Because the more road capacity things, it's increasing our surface area versus just keeping, I think, like you said with the road index, the right maintenance level on our roads.
Right.
And I think maintaining what we have should be higher than expanding what we have. But, we're into these expansion projects because we've already got a contract for those. So, they weren't really something that we could recommend to the board to consider to do later. If the developers come in, within 90 days, we have to write them a check.
David has a question?
Yeah, thanks. I guess a couple things on this. When I think about capital projects, infrastructure, there's a couple things. One is, I think we need to probably focus on those that hopefully could be completed within this year. And again, that just goes to the potential downstream impact on not only development, but oil and gas and property taxes in future years. So I'd want to really look hard at any transactions that are creating a multi-year obligation. Now, we appropriate, and we only appropriate for a year, but I'd hate to have a half-completed path that sits there then kind of half-done for a few years because we run out of funds next year or the year after. So I just want to have some caution on any capital projects that will take multiple years to complete before we obligate ourselves. I think, Mayor, to your question, if we have a contract with a party to do a particular scope of work at a given price, there's probably a material adverse change clause in that contract that says our price is fixed unless, and a whole series of things, one of which is going to be material adverse change, and they could potentially argue that our price is, we get to revisit it. So, and I don't know how many of our contracts tend to have that sort of provision, but there's often an ability to revisit pricing if there's material changes.
Okay.
And Ian McCarter, are you on the line? Do you want to say anything to that point?
He is on the line. Go ahead and unmute yourself, Ian.
now can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay, so I have not seen the contract that Omar and Curtis may have negotiated for the street maintenance. Generally, those are pretty firm, and they don't contain terms. And I don't know whether this is something that would be a materially adverse change, but in this setting, I can't speak because I haven't seen that particular contract.
No, and I don't expect anybody to. I'm just thinking that is something we have to keep in mind as well.
Oh, yeah.
With anything that we say we're moving ahead because we've got a bid or we have a contract, I just think we have to recognize that even though we have a contract and we have a bid in place, things still could change.
Right, well, and I would just say, Mayor, that obviously from staff, if we have a contractor come back and say, look, you know, I told you this material would be $10 a yard, and now it's $500 a yard, I think staff's gonna say, okay, hold on a second, we can't move forward with that, because now we're way out of budget, so, you know, which we would do if there was no revenue issue. You know, staff is gonna always, you know, manage those contracts to the benefit of the body politic.
Yeah.
Okay, so going through these, so power surge equipment, that was equipment that was planned for town hall that we would like to delete. There's a sewer grinder pump at Eastman Park that quite frankly should be paid out of sewer, and for whatever reason, it was coded in this budget out of the general fund money, you know, out of the CIP. And so because it wasn't budgeted out of the sewer correctly, and because we certainly shouldn't pay for it out of the CIP regardless, we're going to recommend deleting that, and then next year it can come back under the sewer fund. Small equipment is just a menagerie of equipment that Recreation thought that they could get rid of this year. I know there was some archery equipment and some other things, but just some things that would have been nice to have that we don't think are a priority now. And then the King Super Sidewalk, so that was part of one of our quick wins, and we've already taken it out to bid, and it came in $20,000 less than we budgeted. So we're still recommending that we would do that connection. We would just, you know, do it at a lesser cost than we had budgeted.
Tom Jones, you have a question?
There we go. Yes, I do. Two items. Number one, the power surge equipment. Wouldn't that be critical? I mean, is this what's going to protect our data, computers at town hall and this sort of thing?
So that's a great question, Tom. So we had put that in there because we thought we were having some surge issues at town hall. And then we had IT work, we had somebody come in and test it, and it turned out that we actually, it wasn't going on. So we thought we were having surges here, but we've actually had an analysis done, and we weren't having surges here. So again, this would be something that we wouldn't have moved forward with anyway, because we've discovered early this year that it actually wasn't an issue. But when we requested it to be budgeted in 2019, we still were anticipating that we may have to purchase that equipment. But you're right, if we were actually having the power surges, it wouldn't be something that we'd be able to recommend cutting because we've got so much equipment that relies on it.
Okay, the other question is on the sewage grinder pump. Are we having trouble down there? Is that at the corner of Eastman and 7th? By any chance? Anybody know?
Can you hear me?
Yes, Eric.
Yeah, who's this?
So this is Eric Lucas, Public Services Director. So no, that is not at the corner of 7th and Eastman. That is actually almost adjacent to the actual restroom in Eastman Park, and the problem is that people are flushing things down the toilet in the park restroom that they shouldn't be flushing. And so what we've had to do for the last 4 or 5 years is when that pit gets backed up because the pumps that are there aren't big enough to grind up what people are trying to flush, the Public Works Department is coming down there and back trucking out that pit. So this was to put in larger grinder pumps to be able to take what people are flushing. Obviously, we should never have to do this if people wouldn't flush inappropriate things down the toilet.
Well, don't you think with the summer coming up and the more hopefully more usage of parks once the the ban is lifted. Don't you think that'd be fairly critical for this coming year? I don't know how often you have to send people down to clean that out, but.
Oh, it's critical, but it's not, it's manageable for another year. We've been doing it for the last 4 or 5 years, and just this year happens to have recommended, because it's got to, I think we did it 5 or 6 times last summer. So it can be a pain for staff, but at the same time, I think in this example where we can save $75,000 and get through another summer, staff's willing to do that.
Is it 75 or 70? In this document, it shows it only at 70. And on the slide, it's at 75.
I'd say trust the spreadsheet.
This one?
I would too.
Yeah,
So it's
that
only
is
70,
spreadsheet. Yeah,
not
that's right.
75?
Okay, any more questions on the infrastructure slide? And I guess one more thing, just to Dr. Jones and everybody, you'll see when we get to the end of this, that we've taken the CIP basically above our reserve policy to $50,000. That's how tight we are. So, you know, I think most of these things, when you look here, you can say, well, geez, that's critical, or that's something we should consider doing. But we've, you know, at least if the board supported the recommendations the staff has put in here, where we're leaving a $50,000 buffer above our reserve policy. So there's not really a whole lot of, you know, money to play with here. You know, this is, you know, really, I think everything that we have that kept in there, we're saying we think is more critical, but that doesn't mean that we're not recommending cut things out here that could be argued are critical.
David, you have a question?
Yeah, thanks. Just to kind of add to the point I was, I guess, trying to make earlier, there's not significant cuts, at least right here in the infrastructure, and fingers crossed, this is all we really do have to do in the current situation. I guess what I wanted to make sure is that if we are pursuing everything but what's on this slide, that we be cautious about any project that's going to require multiple years of work. And I look at the widening of 392 and 250, you know, different intersections, large intersections. These are big projects. I hate to put them off, and hopefully we won't be revisiting this in 3 months saying, whoops, we better take another cut at this. But I'm just nervous about projects that will take multiple years in particular and significant funds, just given the lack of clarity that we have on with how this is going to turn out. Anyway, just commentary, not a question. Thanks.
So Carl, can you go to the next slide, please? Okay, so these are what fell into the quality of life. So we're going to convert the Eaton House this year. That seems like an easy $300,000 to save. We had the air quality monitoring equipment at $250,000. I know the board had a lot of discussion about that equipment. So I guess I would stop there and let you guys all chime in about that. But again, we've got a $50,000 buffer at the end of this, so if that stays in, we need to find another $200,000 to remove.
Ken, you have a question?
Yeah, I didn't have my fast enough. Regarding the infrastructure, I agree with Mr. Soslavsky that we don't want to have a project that's half finished. But on the other hand, I'm looking at some point when this virus situation is mostly over, we're going to have people going back to work, businesses open, we will have the same traffic concerns that we've had a few weeks ago. So I appreciate looking at the infrastructure in terms of 6 months from now, we're still going to have traffic issues. So it might not be starting a construction project if we aren't certain about 2021 funds, but at least getting design and studies and those type of things prepared so that we can address those traffic issues that are a big concern for our community.
Right. Okay, thank you. So does anybody on the board have any comments on the air quality monitoring, cutting that equipment this year?
Barry has a question? Go ahead and unmute yourself, Barry.
I thought I was unmuted, sorry about that.
I'm losing my internet connection, so I have to call back in on my cell phone. So, hopefully I sound okay. Yeah, just more of a comment than anything. I think some of us fought pretty hard for the air quality monitoring. It is important. You know, there has been, like you said, Shane, a downturn in the oil and gas business, and I think most of us have probably seen some of the reports with people with that going on, as well as people not driving. It's maybe not as much as a concern, but I just hope it's something like a lot of these things that we might have to put it off for now, but maybe not forever, depending on if we think it's needed later.
From everything that I'm seeing, I think we could put this off, because I think once, obviously all the rulemaking has stopped now too, but I even think, you know, once that rulemaking has come into place, then that could be a time to enter back into this conversation to see, you know, what comes out of that and what that board at that time, where they would go with it, right?
Right. And I totally agree with that, Mayor, and I also would say that again for the board that this is, you know, we're kind of sticking a pin in all of these things, but to the extent that the revenue is better than we're anticipating, you know, there could be a chance where the board says, geez, you know, staff, you lowball this by $1.5 million. We'd really like you to, you know, we'd really like to bring back project X, Y, or Z, and that'll certainly be the board's prerogative. And then also with what Mr. Bennett said, you know, he's exactly right. I mean, that has exactly been the fine line that staff has tried to walk, is trying to pull back on these projects, but still realizing that we're gonna hit August next year and we're gonna be back to normal, and we're gonna have really busy intersections. We're gonna have all the kids back in school, and all the questions our residents have given us about our roads are gonna come back. So that's why you'll see in future slides that a lot of these projects we're recommending that we at least get them through design. We keep them moving to that design function. So we're not actually starting the construction yet, but we have them designed. So to the extent that money comes back, the board will have that prerogative to say, okay, it's shovel ready, let's go. So the next one, the museum collection building, that 236 is what we anticipate we're under budget on that project. So we say museum collection, that's really the park museum collection project, but that's what we're forecasting. We were under budget for that, so that money just comes back. We also had, if you've been in the new museum, we have this rail storage system in there that's really great. We budgeted that $85,000 with the idea that we would go after some grant funds and use that $85,000 to match against that. But again, it's not absolutely critical for this year to do that, so we think we can pull that project back. And then the regional bus stop installation, we budgeted $75,000. We are doing an RFP to see if we can get a private partner to build those for us.
Well, I don't understand why we just don't contract with Lamar, because I had a conversation with Lamar. Lamar will come in and put that infrastructure in at no cost to the town.
Right, well, we've been approached by Lamar, but and another vendor as well, so that's why we're doing a proposal.
But Lamar is at no cost. Why are we even going after anybody else who would charge us anything?
I don't know that anybody would charge us anything. We're just, you know, right now, I don't know if we would have any make-ready costs, so I don't know that we would spend $25,000 there. It's just like, I don't know if we're gonna have some costs coming out, so it's not saying keep 25 in there to spend it. It's just keep 25 in case there are costs to us, which I don't know what they would be.
Well, I would say if there's any cost, then we're not doing it right, because I've had conversations with Lamar, and Lamar had told me categorically that if we went with them, there would be no cost whatsoever to the town to put in those bus stops. And so, I mean, if there's another company out there, but there is even $10 for the cost, I would say, why aren't we going with Lamar, who's told us it is zero cost?
Okay.
Especially at a time like this. Now, more importantly, which now they might have a new model when we come back, which it might not be free anymore either. I don't know. But that was 3 or 4 months ago. It was 100% free.
Miles has a question.
Thank you, Miles Baker. I would echo Barry's thoughts on the air quality monitoring. I think that would be nice if the end of the year that's something we could put back in. And what's Lamar? Are they one of those advertiser?
Yeah, that they put in the all the bus installations in Fort Collins and in Greeley.
are there any standards, or how do we know who they'll put as an advertiser in there?
That would be with an agreement we have with them. And we need to have a separate agreement outside of what Greeley has with them and Fort Collins has with them.
But there are some good models,
Yeah.
Mr. Baker, and there are, like I mentioned, I know Lamar's interested. We met with another local gentleman who's in that business as well. So we did want to do kind of a proposal to interview them and get the proposals, because we know we've got at least 2 interested. There's maybe more. But I think there's pretty good models, again, like with Greeley, they say specifically what kind of advertising they allow, they don't allow. We'd also have the ability to say, geez, we like the bus stops in Fort Collins, or we like the bus stops in Greeley, or you know what, we like the ones in Cherry Creek. So we could really, they've got a lot of merchandise or a lot of things they could bring in. So we could locally kind of design how that looks and also set that standard as far as what that advertising would be.
Yeah, because some of them don't look so good with the faded or scratched up plexiglass with an ad behind it. I mean, I think they look trashy, so that's just my thought.
Okay, any other questions there? So again, and we could, take that down to 0. We just.
I would take it down to 0. That's another 25,000.
Right. But again, it would just be 25 that we're trying to build into the reserve. It's not, if we get under contract and they don't charge us anything, obviously, we're not gonna just give them 25,000 for coming in. It's.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
Okay, Carl, do you wanna go to the next slide? Okay, so just 2 things here. So one is the 7th Street multimodal, and I'd have either Scott or Omar explain this, but basically, we're gonna just do some design work this year. And so we've got a lot of that budget for actual construction that we don't think we're gonna get to. Omar, do you wanna explain that better than I just did?
John's in there too.
Or John?
Yeah, John can too, but this is Omar, Town Engineering Manager. We have to remember we've committed to $150,000 to match the MPO's grant for multimodal options funding. So at this point, the idea would be to go ahead and move forward with design. The design would take approximately up to a year to complete, so we wouldn't be foreseeing any construction costs at this point.
Okay, thank you. And does anybody have any questions from Omar on the 7th Street?
David Soslowski has a question.
Sorry, I do, but it arose in my head before Shane just said, does anybody have a question of Omar? I do not have a question of Omar. It goes back to that whole infrastructure thing. I struggle with this, and I guess Mr. Bennett, I appreciate your comment as well, and I hope we don't have to face this. When I look at the new capital improvements, things that aren't under contract necessarily, I know at one presentation we had a question on possibly a sewer system expansion. When I look at the priorities, it's for me anyway, water and sewer and stormwater as a priority. If we do require new infrastructure improvements in those areas, are those going to be funded can they be funded within the enterprise for fees or other ways?
Yeah, they would be, David. Really, all of them you just named are all funded by their own enterprise fees.
Okay. Okay, good, thanks.
Yep. And then the next one, the cemetery restoration. So I think the board will remember, we just talked about how along the cemetery, we really need to landscape that better. It's fairly unattractive right now, but we're recommending 1 more year of ugly to get past this.
Yep.
Okay, next one, Jess?
That'd be
I'm sorry, Carl.
I would love to.
Well, you've got a computer too.
I've got 2 eyes and it doesn't do I'm doing it.
So the 3 here, so we've had the entryway signage project budgeted, I think, for the last 3 years at least. And again, we've been standing by for the DDA and their kind of sign design. So honestly, it's not likely to move forward this year anyway, but we're recommending to pull that. The point-to-point Wi-Fi, IT had a couple projects in there. I think right now we're recommending we keep the Wi-Fi at the sewer plant because we think that's a little bit more of a secure issue there. So we want to make sure the sewer plant has Wi-Fi. but we're recommending to eliminate the second part of that project. And then the business analytics software that IT wanted to purchase, we want to stick a pin in that for the next year. Any questions on those three?
Same answer.
Okay. Carl? Okay, safety. So you'll see here we have a lot of design only. So the traffic signal at Crossroads and New Liberty, we're recommending that we just do the design on that we don't actually put that traffic signal in this year. The Walnut Street Bikeway we're recommending again just doing the design on that. Does that tie in with 7th Street, Omar?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, and can you explain to the board a little bit how those tie in?
Yeah, from talking to Scott Bolstead about the project need in conjunction with the 7th Street multimodal study, there's a lot of overlap, so it would make sense to combine the projects together
Okay.
in terms of design.
When I think specifically 392 and 7th, I think when we applied for that NPO matching grant, we included that. So actually 392 7th Street multimodal and the 7th Street is kind of all hubbed up into one project anyway from the NPO standpoint.
So do you think we're gonna see some cost savings or is that already into consideration, pooling both of them together?
It was already in consideration.
It's already in consideration.
Yeah, so again, with these, and this is really to Mr. Bennett's point, but we are talking about what things should we still be working on designing in anticipation of having it shovel ready for either later this year or next year. I would put town hall remodel into that. So we have $500,000 budgeted. We want to spend about $10,000 to do some commissioning. We still want to get in all of our HVAC units and everything, have those tested to see if they need to get pulled and replaced or if we should keep them in. So that's been a recommendation from both facilities and from our architect and our owner's rep. And then what would be left is what we're paying the owner's rep this year and our design fees. I don't think we're going to spend $100,000, but right now the owner's rep is, we haven't selected an architect yet. I wanted to have the board conversation first. We're thinking we'll probably spend on design $50,000, $60,000 or so. And so again, my recommendation would be to finish out the design this year on the town hall remodel, and then we'd have a better budget number for next year. Let's see, railroad crossing improvements. We've got an agreement that basically says there's certain intersections that we would go through and improve, or we pay a portion to improve if the railroad does those. I know Terry Walker has reached out to the railroad to see if we could, stick a pin in that this year and not do those. The RRFB at 17 and River Place. So right now, I think we budgeted $125,000 for that. It is going to be an expensive intersection because it's so wide, but staff right now is estimating that we'll be able to save about $25,000 on that project. And again, that was a quick win for the board to do that project. We do have a public safety concern there. And then security tools, $5,000. I don't know. I don't remember at all what that is, Jess. Do you remember?
The security tools are part of the cameras that we're putting in over at PD.
Okay.
And making sure that those are all set to go.
So
that
that was
project's
just-
already started.
Yeah, so that was just a project savings then?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
Does anybody have any questions on the safety slide?
No, I see none.
Okay, next slide, Carl. Okay, so after we've gone through all this, I think that this is where you get to see, and can you move that box? Yes, or I guess I can kind of see. So you see like our park improvement fund keeps a very healthy balance. Same with our conservation trust fund balance is very good. In our CIP, you'll notice that there's a $50,000 difference between the column on the left is the required fund balance, and the column on the right is what we're estimating we're going to have at the end of the year. So based on all the cuts that staff just recommended to the board, we will meet our reserve policy, but again, there's only a $50,000 cushion there. So again, it's like, you know, if we brought that $25,000 back in from the bus stops, now we're at $75,000, but it's still really razor thin. I mean, we're on the right side of the fund balance ledger, but you know, we don't have a whole lot of room to bring any other projects in.
Well, can we go back and look at some things that we didn't look at reducing?
Yeah, absolutely.
Under quality of life? There's two projects under there. There's the phase 1 of the Riverwalk and the Southside Master Plan, and the Diamond Valley Park fixtures and equipment.
Mm-hmm.
So both of those are like 1.7, just right under 1.8 million, which we're all recommending to move forward with. And I understand we've got the fund balance to create those, but there's operations and maintenance after those that don't come out of the park fund that I'm concerned about. Mm-hmm. Creating an additional liability on the town by creating and moving ahead with some of those structures.
Okay. Well,
so I mean, it said design. I mean, I get it. We're already in design, but the design's not cost 1.5 million in that first phase of the Riverwalk. That's completing that whole thing. And I'm wondering, again, back to some of the comments from Mr. Kozlowski. You know, I think we have to think about in terms of. We might have fund balances that currently could cover and pay for that stuff, but then if it creates additional operations and maintenance, because we're gonna have to be looking at doing something probably different, maybe down the road with operations and maintenance, because those budgets are all gonna have to be adjusted and reduced as well.
Right, so if I could work in reverse, so the Diamond Valley Park fixtures and equipment, so those are budgeted as, when Future Legends comes in, you know, one thing that we haven't addressed yet and we're still talking to them about is when we have soccer goals there, when we have different equipment, who's buying that? Do they buy that? Do we buy that? Do we cost share those? So there are going to be fixtures and equipment that goes on like those multi-purpose fields that we don't really have in an agreement right now. So that's why those. So I would say that we've got a maintenance contract with them where we're going to address that kind of stuff. So I would say, you know, I think we're gonna have to spend something out there as they move forward, Mayor. Or if not, I think that we would just pay a higher lease rate for that. That I think is gonna be pay them now or pay them later. And then Eric, I'd ask you to kind of jump in on the phase 1 Riverwalk and your thoughts on that.
Sure, Shane, you're spot on the Diamond Valley FF&E, and then on the Riverwalk, the majority of that project in terms of construction. And obviously you see the note, move through design. The majority of construction is really parking lot to accommodate the parking that we were trying to desperately give back to the church. I don't anticipate a high maintenance impact in terms of the project for this phase 1. If we get to construction this winter and go forward with actual in-river construction where people have more access, there might be some trash pickup increase, but the majority of this construction budget is really for parking on the north side of the river, you know, along the extended Eastman Park Drive over by the skate park, as well as parking on the south side. If we were to be able to look back at that project, that's the bulk of what we would be building late this fall and into the winter. So I understand and share your concern about as we continue to grow the maintenance impact of any of these projects.
Right.
I don't think that's a big concern of mine in this phase 1 portion.
Okay, I forgot that most of that was parking. How much out of the 1.5 is just for the parking? Because that includes study and the parking cost?
That's that's all of the parking. I'm trying to think here off the top of my head. So the design is about 187,000. The rest of that is construction, and I would probably say, and I'm really off the cuff in this, I can get you an answer that's firm. Probably 75% of that is parking related.
Wow, that's expensive. Are we doing a paved parking? Well, let's hope maybe,
Okay,
let's hope
improving
that's one of those
Park
projects where the cost will come down.
Dave?
Yeah, it's improvement of Eastman Park Drive and adding about 175 parking spaces, the majority of which are on the north side.
Okay.
David has a question or comment?
Yeah, I think a question for Dean perhaps, Carl. Looking at this slide, I was kind of quickly looking at, I was trying to tie out the 2020 estimated fund balance on this slide to what it was prior to these adjustments. And I kind of was quickly looking at the 2020 budget. Page 189 has a summary of ending fund balances, but I'm guessing that this isn't apples to apples. So for instance, the Park Improvement Fund shows an estimated balance of 11.9 million. On page 189 of the budget, it shows an ending fund balance of 8.4 million. So I'm thinking I'm not looking at the same thing.
Well, David, a part of that is, you're talking 2020 to 2021. The second part is, we've recommended, like out of the Park Improvement Fund, $4 million for that Diamond Valley multi-purpose field, which is probably the bulk of the difference in those two.
That's correct.
2021. Could I ask that you kind of expand this slide a little bit, just probably more for my knowledge, just the 2020 fund balance requirement, the 2020 fund balance as budgeted, and then the 2020 fund balance as adjusted after these adjustments, and on both revenue and expense. Is that fair?
Yeah, it's really just one more column, right? Like what we thought we were gonna have at the end of this year versus what we think we're gonna have now.
Well, except when you say 2021 estimated fund balance, do you mean the beginning of 2021 or the end?
Yes.
Again, it is referring to.
Oh, okay, so the starting balance in 2021. Yeah, so the one more column is what would it have been before these adjustments?
Yeah, that's super easy.
Okay, great, thank you.
Tom Jones has a question?
Yeah, Eric, refresh my memory on the Windsor Trail System, the pedestrian bridge. Where was that exactly?
So think of, that is funded separately, but think of it as one big project. So we have bid out the trail bridge from the County Road 13 over the Pooter, then make a trail from the north side of the river along 13 to the intersection with 392, and then the High Hops Trail section from 17th down to the intersection of 13 and 392. We've bid them all out as one big project. The total is $1.4 million. 1.1 of it is funded out of Park Improvement Fund or CTF, which is Conservation Trust Fund. The 300,000 that's sitting there that you're looking at on the line 2.8 that's in your budget, in your packet, that is the section between the river and 392, and we put that into the Conservation Trust Fund as well.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Okay, and Mary, did you have any other follow-up questions on the quality of life stuff?
No, that's it.
Okay, yep, all right, next slide. Okay, so operations, I think Dean, you're gonna cover this one.
Okay, as it says here, we talked about so far about capital projects that we will not do or modify this year. The other part of this is operations, and the general fund, the first two there, the general fund and the CRC expansion. They had a better year in 2019 than we put in the 2020 budget when we did the budget. So we could use the extra operating money from those two funds. And then down below, in 2020, we figured this is what it's, at first blush, it looks like, this is what we're gonna head to. And
Well, no, Dean, the 2020 budgeted fund balance, this is what we actually budgeted. So this is what we thought our surpluses were going to be.
okay, my bad. So, that was all I had on that one.
Okay, go ahead and go.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
Obviously, we're gonna not, right now, our repay on the CRC, we're gonna fall below that. I mean, currently, we've been taking in more than what we needed to repay that. But obviously, I think we're gonna not be that way in over the next month or so, perhaps. Are we gonna be able to take it out of, I mean, we were gonna use some of this overage or funding to use as a payoff earlier when that happens. In the meantime, though, if we have an underage, are we able to take it out of this to keep us at least even? So we don't, okay.
So we have really strong fund balances in the general fund and the CRC, and you'll see that in a couple slides, Mayor.
Okay.
But yeah, so we're fine. You know, the real issue with the rec center right now isn't on the spending side; it's just on the revenue side.
Right.
You know, so we're just not bringing anything in right now. So that's definitely pulling some money out. But again, you'll see like the 2020, because we budgeted, we thought we were going to have surpluses this year. That money goes away, it disappears, but there's nothing you have to cut with the surplus you don't get.
Right.
You know, it's just not money that's going in there.
Okay.
Okay. Jess, go to the next slide. Or, sorry, Carl. Gosh darn it.
I would love to.
So these are kind of big picture things. I didn't want to detail all the operational stuff for the board. I just wanted to kind of net out the really big things we're looking to do to balance the budget. So the first one is instituting a temporary hiring freeze. So you say for all remaining 2020 and non-essential positions. And so what it's going to look like is we have somebody who retires tomorrow. We're going to take a look and say, you know, even though this position has been authorized since 2003, is it still essential? Is it a position that we need to hire today? Is it something we can wait 3 months to hire? Is it a position we can eliminate? What are we going to do? So that 657 is just basically the hiring freeze for what was remaining to hire this year anyway. So I would say that 657 is the least amount of money we would save with the hiring freeze. I just can't really monetize the rest of it because, you know, people haven't retired or taken another job yet. But I think that number would grow as the year grows. And then again, as if revenues end up being a lot better, we'd probably look with a little bit different of a lens as far as, okay, can we afford to bring this person on or not? But I just want to let the board know that we're going to highly scrutinize any position, whether it's one that the board authorized for this year, or certainly as people leave, we're going to take a hard look at, you know, do we take that vacancy savings this year or do we replace them? And for some, you know, I tell you, like, you know, we're planning on bringing on our part-time folks here pretty soon because the grass is going to start growing. Like, we've got to have people help us mow. You know, we can't let that function go. So when we say this, we're not saying we're not going to hire anybody. It's just like, are they essential or no? I think somebody mowing the grass, that's an essential position. We're going to bring on that help, but we're going to really take a hard look at all those. Also, non-essential departmental expenditures, and I think the next slide details those out a little bit better, but we're talking about travel, training, conference stuff. I wouldn't say it's been 100% cut, but it has been significantly cut. You know, so there are some departments that have new folks. We do have some people who have ongoing education requirements to keep their certifications or whatever that is. So we're not recommending it down to zero for everybody, but it's going to look markedly different. And can you go to the next slide, Carl?
Well, while we're talking about that, can I just mention something else that I think we should think about? Not cutting, but definitely maybe pausing, is the salary survey. I know we've got that kind of up and going
Yeah.
and contracted, but I don't think anything that they're gonna gather right now, I would say, I would greatly recommend that we need to pause that, because what's going on right now, and depending how long this lasts, is gonna significantly change what whoever's doing that study is gonna find, depending on how long this goes or doesn't. Because if they go on now, they're gonna be relying on data that might not be significant, you know, in the wake of what we're facing right now.
Right, and Mayor, we have had that conversation with that specifically. I think the challenge is, and Jen was gonna take a look to see, I actually asked her to let me know how much we'd spent. My fear is, I think we basically completed it.
Oh, we have.
Yeah, I mean, it's like 95% of the way there. So I agree with you that when it comes to implementing that, that's gonna be another thing, but I
think we're gonna, well, then if that is the case, yeah, I think we're gonna have to go back after, I mean, again, it's all gonna depend how long this goes on. I mean, if this stops in a week or so, then it's gonna be fairly insignificant. But if this goes on for months, then I think it's something that whatever they brought to, that, you know, bring to you, you better go back and re-look at, because I think everybody across the board is gonna be re-looking at salaries.
Right, well, that's.
Because that's gonna be the next thing that folks are gonna have to look at, right?
Right, that's right.
Yeah.
Okay, so as the total savings, we've got conferences, travel, and training at about $221,000. I'll let the board know that that includes us canceling the CML trip this year. So, you know, the travel training would, I would say, is applied to every department, but the board gets to say on whether or not you really would like to go there. I'd remind you that it is in Westminster this year, so it may be an easier sacrifice to make, but that would have all that cut out. The next one is, I'm sorry, guys.
Just the other part of the savings too in the board was NLC.
Right, which we already saved.
And you already saved that,
Yeah.
so yay!
And we did get I mean, a lot of those folks were affected too and had to be quarantined, so.
Right.
We saved on both sides.
Yeah, exactly. It looks like we missed really a horrible trip. Next one is recycling, and so Eric, I'll let you take the lead with this.
Sure, the recycling center, you know, had COVID-19 not happened, we were scheduled to come to you in a work session to discuss this possibility anyway, to give you an update. As we've gone through this process, one of the recommendations in the overall reduction of service to save some dollars is recommending the phasing out of our recycling center. Corey did some great work and research and learned that we are really we're open, but only open and serving about 4% of our population. We're averaging on a monthly basis about 30 trips, 30 visits out of the course of a month. Out of that 4%, most people have trash and recycling services at their home, and there are other options out there. So the operational savings here is about $71,000, and then to jump you back into the CIP, one of the reductions that was in that area, I think was under infrastructure, was $28,000 to replace the compactor, because we could probably limp through this year, but it would have to be replaced next year if the recycling center stays open. So really, that's about a $100,000 savings. We just saw a 3.2% waste management increase for their fee for coming out and collecting the recycles and then disposing of them. There is literally no market for recycling commodities, and we don't expect that to come back anytime soon. So this, while it is a service that some residents enjoy, it really isn't serving the greater good. So it's a reduction that we'd recommend to the board, as well as with the move of folks from Town Hall out here, as well as parks. The current recycling center sits on about half of the parking lot that was built several years ago when Public Works moved out here. So we do have a parking issue that we're currently working through. If we were to get approval to close the recycling center, we could then remove the fencing and solve our parking problems that we currently have with staff that operate out of this facility. I'm
in high favor of this, because I think for the cost savings and the amount of population we serve, my question would be, how much is it costing us to run these spring and fall that we're doing?
Yeah, those
And
could-
could they be those could be an option and supplement, but how much are they currently costing us?
Well, and thank you for that, and I wanna say we've actually, that's built into this operational savings, Mayor. I think we, paid maybe 40 to 50,000 for those two, and we're recommending to go down to one.
It's $55,000, it's $55,000 for both combined.
Okay.
Okay.
It's not in the 71,000 number. It's in a number you're not seeing. We have canceled our April scheduled one for this year. So our intention is to just do one this year. So we'll probably spend about 25 or 30 this year, but typically doing two a year is 55,000.
But that's already that's in a different budget, or that's another
Well,
item, so do we still save 100, or now we only save about 75?
No,
because you gotta add that
those
25?
are being saved.
That's
And,
saved,
and
okay.
then, we also pulled out, I think, $25,000 or $30,000, and it was in, the slide beforehand when we showed like the big aggregate. And so I
Okay.
appreciate you bringing that up, because we should have highlighted that.
Okay.
I'm sorry about that. Yeah, so right now staff would.
It's in the
would rec-
1.4.
Yeah, it's in that 1.4, so we're
Okay.
recommending.
So it's already in there, so we do
It is.
truly save this 100, plus we still get
That's
a
right.
cleanup day sometime
In the
this
fall.
year.
That's right.
Okay.
And we're thinking sometime around leaf season. If we miss
Yeah.
the spring, then let's try to hit it somewhere around leaf season. And then the final one is.
Oh, at least season thing.
What's
Go
that?
ahead.
He's being fun, leaf something.
You're muted, it's okay.
Yeah, could we mute him and have him explain the next item? Is that possible?
Silent.
Okay, do you wanna, anybody else want to chime in on the recycling?
Barry Wilson has a question or comment. Make sure to unmute.
Sorry, I was still muted, I think. Yeah, just my comment about the recycling, I get it. I did the Larimer County 101, and we spent several hours out at the dump and what the market is or is not for recycling materials. So I know, where it used to be something the town would actually maybe profit from. Now it's become like a bigger expense. It's not used by a lot of people. I just anticipate a lot of people are going to be upset about it. I personally, my neighborhood, we have them. Everybody has one in front of their house, and I think a lot of neighborhoods do. Some people, it may mean they have to go out and pay a little bit more for whatever service they have.
Okay.
Okay, and then Eric, do you wanna walk them through the striping and thermal marking?
Sure. The other staff recommended cut here, this came from Brian Rowe, Operations Manager in Streets. We do a fabulous job year after year after year of striping and marking our roads. And so he felt very strongly, and I concur with him, as did Terry Walker, Public Works Director, that we could skip a year, save $205,000, and it would not impact our roads and the safety of our roads as they currently sit today.
So,
And
get-
so you know, I've got a map that shows the roads that we do every year, and it really isn't one section of town. I looked at it again this afternoon. It's a variety of roads spread throughout the entire town.
And this would be just a one-year stopgap, though. I think for ongoing maintenance, we would definitely need to bring it back next year, but I do appreciate Public Works and everybody really thinking about, okay, what could we save here?
Yeah.
And so, okay, Carl, next slide. Okay, so you'll see there, so this is kind of full circle with Dean's opening slide, which is, and we can add that third column that Mr. Slowski had mentioned. So we've got our fund balances here. You'll notice general fund, we sit very strong. The community rec center fund is not great, but remember we have the two funds. We have the rec center fund and the expansion fund. And the expansion fund is sitting very strongly. So, it's still my goal to work with maybe a bond attorney and see if there would be a way to keep that bond election language right to do what we told voters we were going to do, but not have such a convoluted deal where we have these two separate funds and one sitting with 9 million and the other one with 86,000. It still seems a little bit atrocious, but anyway, Dean, I don't know if you or Carl want to weigh in on that. I just don't think there's anything we can do with that fund balance with the rec center fund by itself.
No, I agree with what you said. That was one of the projects for this year, was to see if we could in fact combine those and, make it easier for the county. So, yeah, just echo what you said.
Okay. So with that, so that's the staff presentation right now. I just, again, this is just an overview for the board. I know you've all been asking, I know the board's all been concerned about where our budget's going, and rest assured, staff shares your concern, and we're here working. So I would say, if you want to circle back to the CIP, if there's any other projects you saw in there that you want to still talk about, anything we're recommending cutting, or anything else that you'd like to put on the list, now's a good time to do that.
And how does this come back before the board? Does it come
Well,
back before it's kind of a?
Right now, it doesn't
It
really
doesn't?
need to
Okay.
come back, just because we have the money budgeted, and staff's recommending that we spend less money in all these places. So I don't think there's.
So you just, if you don't hear anything different, you would just make all these adjustments
That's right.
across the departments, and start moving ahead with those reductions. And then I guess reevaluate and relook at this when this is over, or a couple months
That's
from
right.
now, or whatever the time.
That's right, Mayor. Yeah, I think, in 90 days, maybe we're sitting back down with the board, all in the same room, and talking about this stuff. But yeah, right now, this is just to see, if there's a project that we're putting a halt to, that the board said, no, that's too high of a priority, I want to see that still going, or vice versa. If there's a project in here that we're going to design, and you think it's such a low priority, you don't want it in there now, now's the time to give us that feedback. But otherwise, we'll just kind of implement as suggested.
Okay, do you see anybody?
Not yet.
Anybody have any other suggestions or questions?
Miles has a comment? Go ahead, Miles.
Thank you, Miles Baker. Can we get a copy of this presentation?
Yes, yeah, absolutely. We'll email it to you right after the presentation. I'll let you know this, we were still editing it about 15 minutes before we came online, so it's been a work in progress. But yeah, we'll email it to you tonight.
And I'd like to reserve a couple days. I want to look at the spreadsheet and in the context. So,
I'm sorry, Miles, you kind of cut out. Would you mind restating that?
yeah, I want a couple extra days to review the spreadsheet in the context of the presentation we saw tonight.
Of course. Oh yeah, and we can, if the board has any questions individually, please send those to me. Or if there's something the board wants to revisit again, every work session, basically, until it's different, is going to be, COVID-19 related. So if we need to sit back down and have this conversation about this stuff, we can certainly do that.
Tom Jones has a question?
Comment. Yeah, personally, I want to thank the staff for this proactive approach to basically this crisis we're in, and for getting these suggestions together so fast, and taking this conservative approach. I think it's going to pay big dividend. Whether we need it all or not, we don't know, but it's certainly good to be in this position looking forward. So thank you for me.
Oh, thanks, Tom.
David, you have a question or comment?
Yeah, I guess just Shane, if you are modifying any of the presentations, I'm trying to tie things out to the budget book, the sort of fund balances and things, and maybe that isn't where I should be looking, but to the extent you're adding that column that I was referencing, if you could, when you transmit that, let us know where to look in the budget book to kind of connect everything, it would help me anyway.
Okay.
Thanks.
Paul? Go ahead and unmute. There you are.
Yeah, well, you're okay. I would like to, Paul Renmeyer, Town Board, District 4, I would second Mr. Baker's request to, after we've had a chance to digest the presentation tonight along with the numbers, to be able to possibly have another work session. I don't think it would be long, but maybe just circle back on these, or are we just going to follow up with Shane regarding what items we would like to readdress or, cast priority on over other things?
I would recommend that right now, if everybody's gonna take some time individually to go back, that you go back and send whatever additional thoughts or requests are to Shane, and then he can compile all those, and then based on what he sees, if he sees a lot of different things, or one or two, he can make that determination, whether it's an email out to all of us, or hey, maybe we need to have a bigger conversation. Because if it's one or two small things, you might just add it to or adjust and send an email, but if you hear a lot of different things and some bigger concerns, then yeah, let's get on another call.
Okay, sounds great.
I'm seeing no others right now.
Okay, great.
Okay? If not, then I guess that concludes our special work session, or I guess our town board work session this evening. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.